The Future's mission is so important to me because I think it's really important to support new businesses, new tech-enabled businesses in the sport ecosystem. Yeah, so the Everything in Sport Women's Edition's mission is really important to me because I believe that we really need to bolster women within the sport space. I think it's where the sport is headed, and it's going to be key in building out the infrastructure for sport going forward. Financial education, particularly in women, is really important to me because it's been part of my life's work thus far. One of the reasons why I came into the career that I did was because I genuinely believe that financial freedom is one of the most important elements to really becoming your truest self and enabling particularly athletes, but also those within the sport industry in itself, to make much better decisions, much higher performance, and really allow them to, as I say, tap into their full potential. I think it's twofold as well, in the sense that financial freedom is also about knowledge. It's about understanding. It's about unlimiting yourself and your own beliefs and understanding where you're really coming from. And I think once you've got your day dot, as in the thing that you most understand about your situation sorted and solved and put away, then you're going to be the best part of what you can be. So it's really about empowerment. I think financial education is so much about empowering the individual to take control of their own finances, of their own selves. And for women, it's even more important. And the reason why is that, historically women haven't been financially free. I think it was the 1980s, actually, that women first started being able to have a credit card or a bank account on their own. So this is very new ground for us. And particularly in male-dominated industries like sport, like finance, which is what I'm in, I think it's part of this empowerment piece for women, but also about allowing them to be equal and have the same equity as men within the roles that they have. So I think there is a need for a governing body around international federations and NGBs. It's, again, quite a difficult question because there are so many facets to sport. There are so many facets to understanding sport, sports teams, players, individuals, and there are so many parts that we can play within that. On the front of whether or not there should be a body which is able to drive forward the really key issues, I think that's very important. It's things like sustainability, for example. At the moment, sports clubs and individuals are having to take their own interpretation of that. But actually, what's important is that there is a governing body that can lay down the groundwork and the framework for those clubs to actually, produce tangible results and also be aligned to each other. So I think there's this kind of conversation around what is publicly expected and what is privately expected from these clubs, and sports teams, etc. And I think the best way that you can ensure that actually there is one voice with sport for things like women's rights, equality, sustainability, the environment, there needs to be a body that is able to really make key decisions and lay down that framework. To me, when I look at sport and I look at where we've come, it's incredible. I think the space that we've covered in such a short time, particularly since COVID, sport has been growing 6% a year on year pre-COVID. COVID, it took a 15% growth dip, and post-COVID, it's grown 6.5% per year. So from not only an investment perspective, but also from the perspective of where is this going, it's going up and up. So it's getting bigger, the audiences are getting larger, the exposure is huge. And I think it's essential that we have something in place that can ensure it doesn't get out of control. And for example, that it's legislated effectively, appropriately, properly. But whether or not that we're ready for that and we're ready for what that will look like, I think we still have a little bit of a way to go. Yeah, so I think independent of any other kind of complex body that's gone before, I think it needs to be able to make decisions not based necessarily on things like profit. For example, with football clubs, you see that a lot, where decisions are purely based off the fact that we need profit. And again, for private equity or investment, that's also based on profit. But really, I think you need a body that is able to take care of its people and not necessarily the business interest. That is a part of it too, but it's about providing security. So if I were to put it together tomorrow, it would really be based on social, environmental, kind of governance, and as I said before, ensuring that these bodies and clubs are kept to the same hymn sheet. I think one of the issues in sport now is that there is so much development. For example, you have esport. I mean, who's governing esport at the moment, and how does the governance of esport correlate to the governance of football? Well, they're two completely separate things, and therefore you can't integrate that easily without it being a completely separate body that's actually looking at much more social elements of that. So protecting women, protecting our athletes, protecting their families, their wages, their pensions. You see it a lot in football where they're given huge salaries, but the actual footballer's pension is, I think it's 12,950 or something very similar each year, and that's across the board. So great, it's amazing that they're funding pensions, but I think there needs to be an element of at an institutional level of care taken. And I think to do that, you would have to put together that body to be able to deliver specifically on issues that are unlinked to anything that individual sports might need to generate. And that's the key. I work with brand partners at the moment in the sport that I'm in. I'm very, very lucky to do that, and I do it through the club that I'm a member of. And the fact that I am being invested in as an athlete, and I'm not an elite level, but I'm kind of one cut away from that. It means everything, because it means that you're being developed in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so. And I think it's so important on that kind of roster that opportunity is given to athletes in whatever sphere that they're in. So as an example, elite athletes are expected to get sponsorship. That's quite rare, actually. It's not very often that an elite athlete does get really strong sponsorship, unless they're Premier League or they're in F1 and they're working with these brands constantly. But for a runner, for example, or an athlete, you look at people like Laura Muir or Eilish McColgan, that their drive for sponsorship is much more challenging, and it's because they don't have the platform that other athletes do in much more kind of watched sports, I suppose. So I think there's a challenge for investment there. It's about viewers, and again, it's when we're talking about these governing bodies, you kind of want the athletes to be looked after on their own individual level, rather than it necessarily needing to be sponsorship and investment that they have to go out and get. That is what kind of saves them or allows them to take their sport to the next level. So there's huge challenges there, because it means that we're losing talent, and talent loss is probably the worst thing that could happen within sport. Particularly in a country like the UK, who are very competitive on a global level. If we're losing talent because we're not appropriately investing in our athletes, purely because we're only investing in athletes that we see every single day who probably don't need it, that's going to come up as a massive barrier to us performing at the highest level we can. I think the second part of that is that there is a huge disparity between private investment and public investment. And by that I mean, I'm trying to make this as kind of simple as possible, but a lottery funded athlete is fantastic. That's great, and it's amazing that we have facilities or options like that, and you see that across the globe, where there are again, governing bodies or other funding available. But the big hitters are always the brands and the sponsorships, and that's what takes an athlete to the next level and really kind of propels them forward in their career. So, and those brands and those sponsorships are very, very rarely investing in, your local cricket club. And they're very rarely kind of bridging that gap. So there's this huge part of sport, probably in the semi-professional levels, again, where you're hemorrhaging talent, because I think that there was a fact earlier that I saw that was the average female sports person, I think something like 70% or nearing 70% make under £10,000 a year as a professional sports person. So that's not sustainable. And they're probably in that semi-professional kind of gap. So it's there that there really needs to be investment. And that is the key challenge, is how do we amplify those athletes and get them to the point where they are, delivering the growth that big investment requires, but that we're bringing them through on a talent level from those much, much smaller communities. And I think that would be my thought on the biggest challenge.